They bound her hands in iron thread and left her to die in a forest where even wolves feared to tread. She expected monsters. She expected death. Instead, the vampire king knelt before her in the rain, his hand trembling for the first time in 4 centuries, and whispered, "They cast you out because they recognized a power they were never meant to see." The shadows always moved wrong around Brina Nightfall. They lengthened when she cried, curled like living things when anger flickered through her chest. The villagers of Blackthorn Marsh had noticed since she was born. Now, at 17, Brina kept her eyes down as she carried water from the well, avoiding the warding symbols old Marwen made as she passed. Just get home, stay quiet, stay small. But that night she heard the voices behind the smithy's wall. 3 more dead this week, Elder Garrick's voice cut through the darkness. The girl. It's always been the girl. She's just a child, someone protested weakly. A cursed child, Elder Moira said coldly. We use the old way, before dawn. Brina's blood turned to ice. The old way meant the deadwood forest, meant sacrifice. They came for her 3 hours before dawn. Brina didn't fight when they dragged her from bed, didn't scream when they bound her wrists in iron thread. Elder Garrick held the branding iron, a crown merged with a crescent moon, glowing red hot. We return the cursed one to the darkness, he intoned. The brand touched her wrist. Brina's scream shattered the night, and every torch in the square flared 20 feet high. The elders gripped her tighter, eyes gleaming with vindication. See what she is? They dragged her to where the deadwood forest began, twisted black trees that belonged to older, darker things that fed on human fear. They shoved her forward and disappeared into the night. Brina was alone. Rain fell as she stumbled deeper into the forest, thorns tearing her skin, roots rising to trip her. When her legs finally gave out, she collapsed against an enormous crimson tree, a blood tree fed by centuries of death. Of course this is where I die. Then she heard footsteps, too light, too precise. A presence loomed over her, vast and terrible. A voice, low, ancient, spoke. Impossible. Varlock Ashcroft had felt the disturbance in the night core 3 hours ago, a ripple through the magical foundation of his kingdom. He'd followed it to find a girl collapsed against the ancient blood tree, human, dying, hands bound in iron. He should have kept walking. Then he saw her wrist, the brand, still glowing, the Queen's sigil, the symbol erased from vampire history 3 centuries ago, the mark of a bloodline that should have died with the Night Queen. Varlock's hand trembled. In 400 years, his hand had never trembled. The girl's amber eyes fluttered open. Please, I didn't do anything wrong. Something in Varlock's chest shattered. This child had been taught to apologize for existing. You did nothing wrong, he said, gathering her into his arms. Dawn approached, the death hour for vampires. But Varlock didn't retreat into shadow. He turned toward his castle. The sun broke over the horizon, touching his skin. He waited for burning, for death. It didn't come. The light was warm. The girl in his arms exhaled softly, her body relaxing. Varlock looked at the impossible sunrise. I don't know why, he whispered, but deep inside a truth stirred. She belongs to my throne. What Brina didn't know, the mark was a seal, not a brand, breaking a suppression spell placed at birth. She didn't know the vampire court had spent centuries burying a prophecy. When the cursed one returns, the throne shall kneel before her. Not beside, before. Brina woke to silk, not the rough wool blankets of her village bed, but fabric so soft it felt like water against her skin. For one disoriented moment she thought she'd died and this was whatever came after. Then the pain hit. Her wrists throbbed where the iron thread had bitten deep. The brand on her left wrist pulsed with a heat that seemed to come from inside her bones. Every muscle ached like she'd been trampled by horses. She forced her eyes open. The room was vast, all dark stone and soaring arched ceilings that disappeared into shadow. Moonlight, or was it starlight, filtered through windows of coloured glass, painting the walls in shades of deep blue and violet. Heavy curtains framed a 4-poster bed large enough for 5 people. Brina sat up slowly, her head spinning. She was wearing a nightgown she didn't recognise, clean and white and far finer than anything she'd ever owned. Where am I? Memory crashed back. The village, the brand, the forest. The door opened. Brina's breath caught. The man who entered moved like shadows given form, silent and impossibly graceful. Tall, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders, and eyes that gleamed silver in the dim light. His face was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw cut from marble, lips that had probably never smiled. He wore black, every piece of clothing tailored with precision that spoke of wealth she couldn't comprehend. But it was his presence that stole the air from the room. Ancient, powerful, dangerous, this was the creature from the forest. "You're awake," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered, low, controlled, carrying centuries of weight. "How do you feel?" Brina's hands clutched the silk sheets. "Where am I?" "My castle. You're safe." "Safe." The word tasted bitter. "You're a vampire." "Yes." "And I'm human." "Also yes." "Then how am I safe?" Brina demanded, fear sharpening her voice. "What do you want with me?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "My name is Varlock Ashcroft. I am king of the vampire territories east of the Blackthorn Marsh. And I want—" He paused as if the words were unfamiliar. "I want to understand what you are." "I'm nothing," Brina said automatically. "I'm cursed. Everyone knows. You are not cursed." Varlock crossed the room in 3 strides, moving faster than her eyes could track. He stopped at the edge of the bed, and Brina shrank back, despite herself. "May I see your wrist?" She hesitated, then slowly extended her left arm. Varlock's fingers were cold when they brushed her skin, gentle despite their obvious strength. He turned her wrist to examine the brand, and Brina saw his jaw tighten. "This is a queen's mark," he said quietly. "A seal from a bloodline that was supposed to have ended 300 years ago." "I don't understand." "Neither do I, yet." He released her wrist and stepped back, giving her space. "But keeping you alive long enough to find answers may prove complicated." The door burst open. A man strode in without knocking, shorter than Varlock but powerfully built, with close-cropped hair and eyes like chips of ice. He wore armour even inside the castle, and a sword hung at his hip. "My lord, the council demands an audience." His gaze cut to Brina, and his lip curled. "About the human." "Commander Ferron Bloodfang," Varlock said, his tone cooling several degrees. "I don't recall summoning you to this chamber. The elders are threatening to convene without you if you don't—" "Let them threaten." Varlock didn't raise his voice, but power rippled through the words. "I will address the council when I choose." Ferron's hand moved to his sword hilt. "My king, bringing a human into the heart of our kingdom is madness. The court is in chaos. Half the guard wants her executed. The other half wants her studied like a lab specimen. And after what happened at dawn—" "What happened at dawn," a new voice interrupted smoothly, "is that our king walked in sunlight for the first time in recorded vampire history." A third man appeared in the doorway, this one lean and elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. He moved with casual confidence, carrying a leather-bound book. "Varric Sterling," Varlock said, and some of the tension left his shoulders. "Tell me you found something." "Always a pleasure, old friend." Varric's gaze swept the room, lingering on Brina with open curiosity rather than Ferren's hostility. "And you must be the girl who's turned our kingdom upside down in less than 6 hours. Impressive." Brina pulled the blanket higher. "I didn't mean to." "Of course you didn't. The best revolutions never do." Varric opened the book, flipping through pages covered in symbols Brina didn't recognise. "I've been researching since Varlock carried you through the gates glowing like a sunrise. The archives mention a prophecy, though most copies were destroyed during the Queen Purge." "What prophecy?" Ferron demanded. Varric's expression grew serious. "When the Cursed One returns, the throne shall kneel before her." Silence filled the room. "Kneel before," Varlock repeated softly. "Not beside." "This is exactly why she needs to die," Ferron said flatly, "before whatever power she carries destabilizes everything we've built." "Touch her," Varlock said, his voice dropping to something predatory, "and I'll make your death last weeks." Ferron's eyes widened. In all his years serving the Vampire King, he'd never heard that tone directed at him. "My lord," he said carefully, "what has she done to you?" Varlock looked at Brina, really looked at her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I don't know," he admitted, "but when I carried her through the dawn, the sun welcomed us both. The castle's wards recognised her, and every instinct I possess tells me that killing her would be the gravest mistake of my immortal life." A bell tolled somewhere deep in the castle, once, twice, 3 times. Varric closed his book. "The council convenes. They'll demand answers you don't have yet." "Then I'll give them the one truth I do have." Varlock's silver eyes never left Brina's face. "She is under my protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me." "They'll call you compromised," Ferron warned. "Let them." Another bell. The summons could not be ignored. Varlock moved toward the door, then paused. "Varric will stay with you. Don't leave this room. The castle is not yet safe." "When will it be?" Brina asked. Varlock's smile held no warmth. "When they learn what happens to those who threaten what's mine." He left, Ferron following with a final suspicious glare at Brina. Varric settled into a chair by the window, opening his book again. "Well," he said conversationally, "this should be interesting. The elders hate mysteries, and you, my dear, are the biggest mystery this kingdom has seen in 3 centuries. "I'm not a mystery," Brina whispered. "I'm just a girl." "Just a girl," Varric repeated, amused. "Just a girl who broke a 300-year-old curse, bears a mark that shouldn't exist, and made the sun bow to a vampire king." He looked up, his eyes kind despite their ancient depth. "Tell me, Brina Nightfall, do you have any idea what you really are?" Brina touched the brand on her wrist, feeling the heat pulse beneath her fingertips. "No," she admitted. "Neither do we," Varric said. "But I suspect we're all about to find out." The council chamber was built to intimidate. Brina stood at its centre, feeling impossibly small beneath vaulted ceilings that disappeared into darkness. Torches lined the walls, actual flames, not the electric lights her village had recently acquired, casting shadows that writhed like living things. Varlock had sent Varric to escort her an hour after he'd left. "The council demands to see you," the advisor had said gently. "I'm afraid refusing isn't an option." Now she faced a semicircle of vampires who looked at her like a problem to be solved, preferably with violence. Varlock sat on a throne of black stone at the chamber's head, his expression, unreadable. He'd changed into formal attire, deep crimson and black, with silver threading that caught the firelight. A crown of twisted metal rested on his dark hair, making him look every inch the immortal king. He looked nothing like the man who'd whispered reassurances while carrying her through the dawn. "The human may approach," a woman's voice rang out, cold and precise. Brina's legs trembled as she walked forward. Varric stayed behind, positioning himself near the chamber doors. Strategic, she realized, blocking the exit. The woman who'd spoken rose from her seat at Varloc's right. She was stunning, pale skin, dark hair piled in elaborate braids, wearing a gown of deep purple that probably cost more than Brina's entire village. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I am Lady Selvara," she said, "chief advisor to His Majesty, and you are the girl found in the Deadwood. Brina Nightfall," she managed. "How charming." Selvara circled her slowly, examining her like livestock at market. "Tell me, Brina Nightfall, do you understand what you've done by entering our kingdom?" "I didn't enter. I was thrown into the forest to die." "Semantics!" An older vampire stood, tall, silver-haired, with eyes like chips of amber. His presence commanded immediate attention. "I am Lord Valerian Harmon, elder of the Eastern Courts. Whether you stumbled into our territory or sought it deliberately, the law is clear. Humans found within vampire lands are to be executed or exiled immediately." Brina's heart hammered. "Then why am I still alive?" "An excellent question," Valerian said, his gaze cutting to Varlock. "One we've been asking our king for the past 6 hours. Varlock leaned forward slightly. "I don't recall requiring council approval for my decisions, Lord Harmon." "You don't." Valerian's tone remained respectful, but steel ran beneath it. "However, when those decisions endanger the entire kingdom, we have a right to understand your reasoning." "In danger?" Varlock's voice dropped dangerously low. "Explain." Ferron Bloodfang stepped forward from his position near the throne. "My lord, with respect, the castle wards are malfunctioning. The Night Throne's crystal is behaving erratically, and this morning sunlight penetrated the inner sanctum for the first time in recorded history." He pointed at Brina. "All of it started when she arrived." Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. Brina caught words like corruption, contamination, human plague. "The wards aren't malfunctioning," Varric said calmly, still by the door. "They're adapting." Every head turned toward him. "Adapting to what?" Selvara demanded. Varric met Brina's eyes across the chamber. "To her." Before anyone could respond, Valerian moved closer to Brina. His nostrils flared slightly and his expression shifted. Shock, then something that looked like fear quickly masked. "Show me your wrist," he commanded. Brina glanced at Varlock, who gave a slight nod. Slowly she extended her left arm. Valerian seized it, turning it to see the brand. His fingers dug in hard enough to hurt, and Brina gasped. "Release her!" Varlock's voice cracked like a whip. Valerian let go immediately, but didn't step back. "My king, do you know what this mark is?" "A queen's seal." "Not just any queen." Valerian's face had gone pale, an impressive feat for a vampire. "This is the mark of the first night. Choose your next words very carefully, Lord Harmon," Varlock interrupted, his tone deadly quiet. The elder's jaw worked. The mark was destroyed, every record burned, every bearer executed. How does this human child carry a symbol that hasn't existed for 3 centuries? "Perhaps," Selvara said smoothly, "because someone wanted us to believe it was destroyed." Her eyes glittered with calculation as she studied Brina. "Tell me, child, who were your parents?" "My mother was a seamstress. My father died before I was born." And your grandmother, your lineage? I don't know. My mother never spoke of... The floor trembled. Every vampire in the chamber tensed. Brina stumbled and Varric moved instantly to steady her, his hand on her elbow. The trembling intensified. Not an earthquake. Something else. Something that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Brina's racing heartbeat. "What's happening?" Ferron demanded, hand on his sword. Varlock stood, descending from his throne in 3 fluid strides. He crossed the chamber to where the Night Throne's crystal sat embedded in the wall, a massive gem that pulsed with faint purple light. Except it wasn't faint anymore. The crystal blazed, growing brighter with each passing second. The light wasn't purple now, it was shifting, cycling through colours that shouldn't exist. And at its core, a pattern was forming, the same crown and crescent symbol branded on Brina's wrist. "Impossible," Valerian breathed. Selvaara had gone very still. "The throne is recognizing her." "Recognizing her as what?" Ferron growled. The crystal pulsed once more, blindingly bright, and every torch in the chamber flared. The flames turned silver, the colour of moonlight, of magic, of something ancient stirring after centuries of sleep. Then, as one, they bowed. The flames bent toward Brina, like subjects acknowledging royalty. Silence crashed over the council chamber. Brina stared at the impossible display, her branded wrist burning hot. I don't know how." "The prophecy," Varric said quietly. "When the cursed one returns, the throne shall kneel before her." Valerian's face twisted with something between rage and terror. "This cannot be allowed. She'll destroy everything." "She'll destroy you," Varlock corrected, his silver eyes fixed on the elder. "That's what you're really afraid of, isn't it, Lord Harmon? Not what she might do to the kingdom, what she might remember." "My lord, I don't—" "You recognized the mark immediately. You knew exactly what it was." Varlock moved toward the elder with predatory grace. "Tell the council, Lord Harmon, how does one recognize a symbol that was supposedly erased from all records?" Valerian's throat worked. The archives contain—" "The archives were purged, every text destroyed, every witness silenced." Varlock's voice grew colder with each word. "Unless you saw the mark before it was erased. Unless you were there when the last Night Queen died." The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Selvaara stepped back, distancing herself from Valerian. Ferron's hand tightened on his sword, but he didn't move. "She was going to destroy us," Valerian said finally, his composure cracking. "The Night Queen's power was growing beyond control. She could walk in sunlight, command the elements. Her very presence weakened our curse. If she'd lived, you would have lost your power," Varlock finished. "So you killed her." "We saved the kingdom," Valerian's mask shattered completely. "We preserved what we'd built, and I'll be damned if I let some human girl undo 3 centuries of—" He lunged. Brina didn't have time to scream. Valerian moved with impossible speed, silver blade appearing in his hand, aimed directly at her heart. He made it 3 feet before Varlock intercepted him. The impact shook the chamber. Varlock's hand closed around Valerian's throat, lifting the elder off the ground like he weighed nothing. "I warned you," Varlock said softly. "Anyone who harms her answers to me." "My lord, wait," Selvaara began. Varlock's eyes blazed silver, ancient power radiating from him in waves. "This council is dismissed. Lady Selvaara, Commander Ferron, remove Lord Harmon to the cells. He'll stand trial for treason against the crown." "Treason?" Valerian choked out. "For protecting our traditions?" "For attempted murder of my guest." Varlock's grip tightened. "And for crimes against the Night Queen bloodline 300 years overdue for justice." He released Valerian, who crumpled to the floor. Ferron and 2 guards hauled the elder upright, dragging him toward the doors. As they passed Brina, Valerian's eyes locked on hers. "You don't know what you are, girl, but when you remember, when you realize what power runs through your veins, you'll destroy him. You'll destroy us all." Then he was gone, his voice echoing down the corridor. The remaining council members filed out in stunned silence, casting fearful glances at Brina. Finally, only Varlock, Brina, and Varric remained. "Well," Varric said into the silence, "that went better than expected." Brina's legs gave out. She sat hard on the stone floor, shaking. "The flames, the crystal, I didn't mean to—" "I know." Varlock knelt before her, and his eyes were gentle again. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Everyone keeps saying that." Brina looked at the brand on her wrist, still glowing faintly. "But if I'm not cursed, then what am I?" Varlock was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Someone the world tried very hard to erase, and failed." The Night Throne crystal pulsed behind them, casting silver shadows across the chamber, painting Brina in light that looked almost like a crown. Varric's private library smelled of old parchment and candle wax. Brina sat curled in an oversized chair, watching the advisor pull book after book from shelves that stretched to the vaulted ceiling. He moved with practiced efficiency, creating stacks on the massive oak table at the room's center. 3 hours had passed since the council meeting. 3 hours since Valerian had tried to kill her. 3 hours since the flames had bowed. Brina couldn't stop seeing it, the way the fire had bent toward her like living things, recognizing their master. "Here." Varric set a leather-bound volume in front of her, opened to a page filled with elegant script and faded illustrations. "The Fall of the Night Queens," written by a court historian who witnessed it firsthand. Brina leaned forward, studying the drawing. A woman with flowing dark hair and eyes that seemed to glow even in static ink. She stood on a balcony overlooking a vast kingdom, her hand raised toward the sun. "She's beautiful," Brina whispered. "She was extraordinary." Varric settled into the chair beside her. "Queen Lyanna Nightborn, last of the Night Queen bloodline. She ruled beside the vampire king for 50 years, and in that time she accomplished what no one thought possible." "What?" "She was breaking the curse." Brina's eyes snapped to his. "The vampire curse, the one that burns us in sunlight, yes, binds us to darkness, steals our mortality." Varric's expression grew distant. Lyanna's presence weakened it. Vampires in her court could tolerate dawn for brief periods. Some even claimed to feel warmth again, to taste food, to experience sensations we'd thought lost forever. How? No one knew. Her power defied understanding. He turned the page, revealing another illustration. Lyanna with her hand pressed to a massive crystal, the Night Throne. She could heal, command elements. Her very blood strengthened the magical foundations that sustain our kingdom. Then why did they kill her? Varric's jaw tightened. Fear. The elders saw her power growing and convinced themselves she would destroy the vampire way of life, that she'd eliminate the curse entirely and leave us human. Would that be so terrible? For creatures who'd lived centuries defining themselves by their monstrosity. Varric met her eyes. Apparently, yes. They poisoned her during a celebration. Silver and nightshade mixed in her wine. She died in agony over 3 days. Brina's stomach churned. And the king, what did he do? Nearly destroyed the kingdom in his grief. Executed half the elders before evidence pointed to just a few conspirators. But the damage was done. Varric flipped several pages to a passage marked with ribbon. Look at this. Brina read the faded script. Before her, death. Queen Lyanna spoke of dreams. of a child bearing her mark, born in the far future when the world had forgotten her name. "She will return," Lyanna whispered. "When darkness deepens and hope dies, she will come, not to rule beside the throne, but to claim what was always hers." "A prophecy," Brina breathed, "one the elders tried to erase by hunting down every member of Lyanna's bloodline. They killed children, burned villages, destroyed any evidence the Night Queens had ever existed." Varric's voice hardened. "Apparently they missed one." Brina touched the brand on her wrist. "My mother never told me anything about our family. She said the past didn't matter. She was protecting you. If anyone had known you carried Night Queen blood—" A knock interrupted him. Varlock entered without waiting for permission. He'd removed his crown, and his hair fell loose around his shoulders. He looked younger somehow, though his eyes still held centuries. "Varric, I need those records from—" He stopped, seeing Brina. "You're still awake." "Can't sleep," she admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Lord Valerian's face. The way he looked at me like I was something that needed to be destroyed." Varlock moved closer, his expression unreadable. "He was one of them, one of the conspirators who murdered Queen Lyanna." "You knew?" "I suspected. Tonight confirmed it." He sat on the edge of Varric's desk, studying Brina. "I've ruled for 400 years. Lyanna was... She was the only time I felt something beyond duty, beyond survival." The raw honesty in his voice made Brina's chest ache. "When she died," Varlock continued quietly, "I swore no one would ever hold that power over me again. I became colder, harder, focused only on maintaining order." His silver eyes found hers. "Then I found you beneath that blood tree, and everything I'd carefully built started crumbling." "I'm sorry," Brina whispered. "Don't be." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'm beginning to think the crumbling was overdue." Varric cleared his throat diplomatically. "I'll just give you two a moment." He disappeared through a side door, leaving them alone. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. "Earlier," Brina said finally, "when the crystal reacted to me, I felt something, like the castle was remembering." "It is," Varlock gestured to the library around them. "This place was built by Lyanna's magic as much as stone. When she died, it began dying too. Slowly over centuries, but dying nonetheless." He paused. "Until you arrived." "I don't understand what I'm supposed to do." "Neither do I." Varlock stood, crossing to the window where moonlight spilled through coloured glass. "But I know what Valerian said was true. Your presence is changing things. The wards are shifting. The curse is weakening. And if you're truly Lyanna's heir—" "I'll destroy everything," Brina finished, echoing Valerian's warning. "Or save it." Varlock turned back to her. "The question is whether I'm brave enough to find out which." Before Brina could respond, a tremor shook the library. Not like before. This was deeper, more violent. Books tumbled from shelves. The crystal chandelier overhead swayed dangerously. Varlock moved instantly to shield Brina, pulling her against his chest as a massive tome crashed where she'd been sitting. The tremor intensified. Through the window, Brina saw impossible things happening in the courtyard below. Flowers were growing, pushing through cracks in the ancient stone, vines climbing walls that had stood barren for centuries, and they were glowing, soft silver light that pulsed in rhythm with Brina's heartbeat. "What's happening?" she gasped. Varlock's arms tightened around her. "You're happening! The castle is responding to your blood, your presence. It remembers what it was like when a Night Queen walked these halls." "Make it stop." "I don't think you can, not anymore." He pulled back enough to look at her face. The seal that suppressed your power, the brand broke it. Whatever you were meant to become, it's waking up. Another tremor, stronger this time. The floor cracked, and silver light blazed through the fissures. Varlock! I've got you! The light exploded upward, engulfing them both. Brina screamed, but there was no pain, only warmth spreading through her veins like liquid starlight. Images flooded her mind. Not her memories. Someone else's. A woman with dark hair laughing in a garden of night-blooming roses. The same woman dancing in moonlight, her feet bare on marble floors. The woman crying as she was dragged to a chamber, silver chains burning her wrists. Her final words, "Tell her, when she comes, tell her she was always meant for the throne." Brina gasped, returning to herself. The light faded. The tremors stopped. Varlock still held her, his eyes wide with something between awe and fear. "What did you see?" "Her," Brina whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I saw Liana. She knew. She knew someone would come after her." "Not someone." Varric had returned, standing in the doorway with an ancient scroll. His hands trembled slightly. "I found the original prophecy, the complete version the elders tried to destroy." He read, "When the cursed one returns, born of the fallen queen's blood, the throne shall kneel before her. She will break what was broken, heal what was lost, and reclaim the crown that death could not destroy. But first, she must choose vengeance for the past or mercy for the future, and her choice will determine whether the kingdom rises or burns." Silence filled the library. Brina looked at the brand on her wrist, now glowing with steady silver light. At the flowers blooming outside the window. At Varlock, who watched her with an expression she couldn't name. "I don't want vengeance," she said quietly. "I just want to understand why I was born this way. Why I survived when others died." Varlock's hand cupped her face, surprisingly gentle. "Perhaps you were born to do what Liana couldn't finish, to break the curse completely. And if I destroy your kingdom in the process," his smile was sad, ancient, "then maybe it deserved to fall?" Outside, the courtyard bloomed with silver roses. Inside, something in Brina's blood remembered being a queen. The attack came 3 nights later. Brina had been sleeping, actually sleeping, for the first time since arriving at the castle. The nightmares of her village casting her out had finally faded, replaced by strange dreams of walking through silver gardens and wearing a crown that felt familiar. She woke to the sound of breaking glass. Her eyes snapped open in darkness. The moonlight that usually filtered through her chamber windows was blocked by figures moving with inhuman speed. Assassins, 3 of them, dressed in black, faces covered. Silver blades gleamed in their hands, the kind of weapons that could kill even vampires. Brina rolled off the bed as the first blade struck where she'd been sleeping, tearing through silk sheets. She hit the floor hard, scrambling backward. "Scream and you die faster!" one hissed. She screamed anyway. The assassin lunged. Brina grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and swung wildly. It connected with the vampire's temple, and he staggered back with a curse. Not enough to stop him. Nothing she did would be enough. "I'm going to die. After everything, I'm going to die in this room." The second assassin raised his blade. The chamber door exploded inward. Varlock moved like death incarnate, crossing the room faster than Brina's eyes could track. He caught the assassin's wrist mid-strike, twisted, and the sound of bones snapping echoed through the chamber. The vampire screamed. Varlock threw him against the wall hard enough to crack stone. The other 2 attackers turned to face the king. "Run!" Varlock commanded Brina, not taking his eyes off the assassins. "Now!" But Brina's legs wouldn't move. She watched, transfixed and horrified, as Varlock fought. He was beautiful and terrible, every movement precise, controlled, lethal. Within seconds, one assassin lay unconscious, the other pinned beneath Varlock's boot, silver blade at his throat. "Who sent you?" Varlock's voice was deadly calm. The assassin said nothing. Varlock pressed the blade deeper, drawing blood. "I can make this last hours, days. Tell me who ordered this, and your death will be quick." "You've gone soft, my king," the assassin spat. "Protecting a human, walking in sunlight. Soon you'll be just like them, weak, mortal, pathetic." Understanding crashed over Brina. "They're not just trying to kill me. They want to stop what I'm doing to the curse." Varlock's jaw tightened. "Who sent you?" "Someone who remembers what we used to be," the assassin said. "Before you let that human filth corrupt." He never finished. Varlock moved the blade in one swift motion, and the assassin went limp. Silence filled the chamber, broken only by Brina's ragged breathing. Varlock straightened slowly, blood on his hands. When he turned to face her, his expression was carefully blank. "Are you hurt?" Brina shook her head, not trusting her voice. Footsteps pounded in the corridor. Varric appeared first, followed by guards. His eyes swept the scene. Broken window, dead assassins, Brina trembling on the floor. "Gods!" he breathed. "How many?" "3. Varlock's voice was cold, controlled. "Well trained. They knew the castle layout, knew which chamber was hers, knew exactly when the guard rotation changed." "Inside job," Varric said grimly. "Obviously." Varlock moved to Brina, crouching before her. Up close, she could see the rage burning beneath his controlled exterior. "Did they hurt you?" "No, you stopped them before—" Her voice broke. Varlock's hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I won't let anyone hurt you. I swear it." "My lord." A guard appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Commander Ferron requests an audience. He says it's urgent." "Of course he does," Varlock muttered. He stood, helping Brina to her feet. "Varric, take her to the secure chambers. Triple the guard." "Wait," Brina said. "The assassin said someone who remembers sent them. What did he mean?" Varlock exchanged a look with Varric. "Old vampires, the ones who existed before Lyanna, who see the weakening curse as a threat to our identity. How many are there?" "Enough to be dangerous." Ferron Bloodfang was waiting in the strategy room, pacing like a caged wolf. Varlock entered with Brina at his side, a deliberate choice. If someone in his court wanted her dead, they'd have to face his protection publicly. "My lord," Ferron said, then stopped, seeing Brina. "You brought the human to a military briefing." "She's the target. She deserves to hear this." Varlock moved to the large map table dominating the room. "Report." Ferron's jaw worked, but he complied. "We've identified the assassins. All 3 were part of the Eastern Guard, Valerian's personal unit." "Valerian is in the cells." "Yes, but his loyalists aren't." Ferron placed 3 markers on the map. "We've arrested 12 conspirators so far. All admit to being part of a group calling themselves the Preservation Order. Their goal is to eliminate the human and restore the natural order of vampire supremacy." Brina felt Varlock tense beside her. "How large is this group?" he asked quietly. Ferron hesitated. "We estimate 40% of the nobility, maybe more." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 40%, Varlock repeated softly. "Nearly half my court wants her dead." "Not just dead, my lord. They want to send a message that humans have no place in our world, that the old ways must be preserved." Ferron's expression hardened. "I don't agree with their methods, but I understand their fear. She is changing things. The curse weakens daily. Some vampires are reporting the ability to tolerate dawn, to feel warmth, to be less monstrous," Varlock interrupted coldly. To be less vampire, Ferron corrected. My lord, our strength comes from our curse. Our immortality, our power, our very identity is built on being separate from humanity. If she breaks that curse completely, we might become something better, or something extinct. Ferron slammed his hand on the table. The human kingdoms outnumber us 1,000 to 1. Our curse is the only thing keeping them from wiping us out. Without it, we're just people, vulnerable, mortal. Would that be so terrible? Brina asked quietly. Every eye turned to her. Yes, Ferron said flatly. I've lived 300 years as a vampire, fought in wars you can't imagine, survived things that would destroy a human in seconds. You're asking me to give that up for what? The privilege of growing old and weak and dying? The privilege of being free, Brina said, of walking in sunlight, of not being feared by everyone you meet. I don't want to be loved, Ferron snarled. I want to survive. Then you're already dead, Varlock said softly. You just haven't realized it yet. Ferron's face went pale. My lord. Dismissed, Commander. Double the guard on all entrances. I want a list of every Preservation Order member by dawn. Ferron saluted stiffly and left, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Silence settled over the room. He's going to betray you, Brina whispered. I can feel it. I know. Varlock stared at the map, at the markers indicating conspirators throughout his kingdom. But I can't execute him for thoughts, only actions. And by the time he acts, it might be too late. Varlock's hand found hers, his touch cold but steady. Then we'll have to be ready. Outside, thunder rumbled. Storm clouds gathered over the castle, and lightning forked across the sky. In her chamber, the secure one Varric had taken her to, Brina stood at the window watching the storm. The brand on her wrist pulsed in rhythm with the lightning. Something was building. She could feel it in her blood, in the way the castle hummed around her, in the flowers that kept blooming in impossible places. Power, growing stronger every day. Varric had warned her, when she fully awakened, she'd have to choose. Vengeance or mercy, destruction or healing. But watching the storm rage, feeling the anger of vampires who wanted her dead simply for existing, Brina wondered if she'd have a choice at all. Maybe some things were meant to burn, maybe some curses were meant to break, and maybe some crowns were meant to be claimed with fire. Lightning struck the tallest tower, and for a moment Brina could swear she saw a woman's silhouette in the flash. Dark-haired, beautiful, wearing a crown. Lyanna, watching, waiting, ready for her heir to finally awaken. The Hall of Echoes was meant for judgments. Ancient kings had used it to pronounce sentences, settle disputes, deliver verdicts that shaped the kingdom. Its acoustics were perfect, every word spoken at its centre, carried to every corner, impossible to mishear or misinterpret. Today it would witness something it hadn't seen in 3 centuries, a Night Queen's power unleashed. Brina stood in the hall's centre, surrounded by the entire vampire court. Varlock had called a mandatory assembly, every noble, every elder, every soldier. They filled the tiered seats rising on all sides, hundreds of pale faces watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hatred. "This is madness," Lady Selvaira murmured from her position near the throne. "Displaying her like this will only inflame tensions." "Good," Varlock said coldly. "Let them see exactly what they're conspiring against." It had been Varric's idea. "The assassination attempt proved they see her as weak," he'd explained the night before. "Show them the truth. Show them what she's becoming." Now, watching Brina stand alone in the hall's centre, Varlock wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. She looked so small, 17 years old, wearing a simple dress of deep blue, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. The brand on her wrist was visible, glowing faintly silver, but it was her eyes that had changed. They'd been amber before. Now they held flecks of silver that caught the torchlight, making them almost luminous. "Lords and ladies of the vampire court," Varlock's voice rang out, "you've demanded to see the human who's corrupting our kingdom. Very well, here she stands." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Some of you," Varlock continued, "have taken it upon yourselves to judge her, to sentence her, to execute her without trial." His eyes swept the assembly. 3 nights ago, assassins entered her chamber. They failed, but their attempt revealed something important. He descended from his throne, moving to stand beside Brina. The gesture was deliberate, protection, but also allegiance. "You fear her because you fear change. You cling to our curse like a shield, believing it makes you strong." Varlock's voice hardened. "But strength built on fear is brittle, and today you'll learn exactly what true power looks like." Ferron Bloodfang stood abruptly. "My lord, this is—" "Commander, be silent." Ferron's jaw clenched, but he sat. Varlock turned to Brina, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "Show them. Don't hold back." "I don't know how," she whispered. "Yes, you do. You've been holding it in since the moment you arrived. Let go." Brina's heart hammered. "What if I can't control it?" "Then we'll burn together." Varlock stepped back, giving her space. "Trust yourself." Brina closed her eyes, reaching for the power she'd felt building inside her, the warmth in her blood, the pulse in her branded wrist, the way the castle seemed to breathe with her. Heartbeat. Nothing happened. Laughter echoed from the upper tiers. "The great threat," someone called out mockingly. "Look how she trembles." More laughter, cruel, dismissive. Anger sparked in Brina's chest, not the hot rage of the moment, but something colder, deeper. "They threw me away like garbage, called me cursed, left me to die. And now they laugh." The brand on her wrist flared hot. "She's nothing but a frightened child." Brina's eyes snapped open. They blazed pure silver. The temperature in the hall plummeted. Frost spread across the stone floor in spiderweb patterns, radiating from where Brina stood. The torches guttered, their flames turning from orange to silver white. Someone gasped. Brina raised her hand, not consciously, more like her body knew what to do, even if her mind didn't. Power surged through her veins, and suddenly she could feel the hall. Every stone, every column, every vampire sitting in judgment of her. The castle itself responded to her presence, recognizing her blood. "Impossible," Selvara breathed. The massive crystal chandelier overhead began to glow, not from the candles, from within, pulsing with the same silver light as Brina's brand. Varric stood slowly, awe written across his face. "She's accessing the castle's foundation magic, the same power Lyanna used when she built this place." "Stop her!" someone shouted. "Before she—" Ferron Bloodfang moved. He was fast, vampire fast, covering the distance to Brina in heartbeats. His hand went to his sword, silver blade singing as it cleared the sheath. "This ends now," he snarled. The blade descended toward Brina's neck. She didn't move. Didn't need to. The air itself solidified between them. Ferron's blade struck an invisible barrier and shattered, pieces of silver scattering across the floor like broken stars. Ferron stumbled back, shock written across his face. "Commander," Brina said, and her voice resonated with harmonics that shouldn't exist, like multiple people speaking in perfect unison. "You cannot harm me, not with silver, not with steel, not with anything forged by vampire hands." "What are you?" he whispered. "What I was always meant to be." Brina's power expanded outward in a wave. Every vampire in the hall felt it, a presence pushing against their very essence, testing the curse that made them what they were, and finding it weak. The curse was breaking. Not completely, not yet. But where Brina's power touched, the darkness that sustained vampire existence began to crack. "No," Ferron breathed. "No, you can't." He lunged again, weaponless but desperate. This time 12 soldiers followed him, members of the Preservation Order, their faces twisted with fear and rage. They thought overwhelming her with numbers would work. They were wrong. Brina's hand clenched into a fist. The stone floor erupted. Pillars of crystallized moonlight shot upward, creating a cage around the attacking vampires. They slammed into the barriers and froze, literally froze, their bodies encased in silver crystal that pulsed with inner light. The hall erupted in chaos. Vampires scrambled for the exits. Others drew weapons. Some simply stared in terror. "Enough!" Varlock's voice cracked like thunder. The room fell silent. He stood before his throne, power radiating from him in waves, but even his presence couldn't match the sheer force emanating from the girl in the hall's centre. "You wanted to see what she is," Varlock said, his voice carrying to every corner. "Now you know. Brina Nightfall is not human, not anymore. Maybe she never was." He descended the steps, moving through the frozen soldiers without sparing them a glance. When he reached Brina, he did something that made the entire court gasp. He knelt. "My lord, no," Selvara began. "She is the heir of Queen Lyanna Nightborn," Varlock said clearly, "the true blood of the Night Queen line, and as your king, I recognize her claim." "Claim to what?" someone demanded. Varlock looked up at Brina, and something in his ancient eyes softened. "To the throne that's always been hers." Brina stared down at him, trembling with power she was barely containing. "I don't want your throne." "I know. That's exactly why it should be yours." The frozen soldiers began to crack free of their crystal prisons, gasping. Ferron fell to his knees, coughing, but his eyes remained fixed on Brina with undisguised horror. "She'll destroy us," he rasped. "Everything we are, everything we've built." "Perhaps," Varric said from his position near the throne, "that's precisely what needs to happen." Brina's power began to fade, retreating like a tide. The silver light dimmed. The frost melted. Her eyes returned to amber flecked with silver. She swayed, suddenly exhausted. Varlock caught her before she fell. "I've got you." "I didn't mean to hurt them," she whispered against his chest. "I just wanted them to stop." "They'll stop." Varlock's arms tightened around her. "They have no choice now." He lifted her easily, carrying her toward the exit. The crowd parted automatically, fear etched on every face. At the doorway, Varlock paused, looking back at his assembled court. "From this moment forward, Brina Nightfall is under my absolute protection. The penalty for harming her is death. The penalty for plotting against her is death. The penalty for speaking against her," he let the silence stretch, "is for me to decide." "You would choose her over your own kind?" Ferron demanded, finding his voice. Varlock's smile was cold as winter. "I would choose the future over a past built on murder and fear. If you can't accept that, Commander, there's the door." He carried Brina out, Varric following close behind. The Hall of Echoes remained silent for a long time after they left. Finally, Selvara spoke, her voice shaking. "We cannot allow this. A human, even a Night Queen heir, cannot rule vampires." "She won't have to," Ferron said quietly, his eyes fixed on the shattered remnants of his sword. "She already does." The frozen soldiers stood slowly, examining the crystal that had imprisoned them. It still glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat, like a reminder, like a warning. In the secure chambers, Brina finally lost consciousness. The power had drained everything from her, leaving her hollow and shaking. Varlock laid her on the bed gently, brushing hair from her face. "That was dangerous," Varric said, "showing them what she can do. You've made her an even bigger target." "Or made them too terrified to act." Varlock stared at Brina's sleeping face. "She froze a dozen trained soldiers without breaking a sweat, Varric. Imagine what she'll be like when she fully awakens." "That's what terrifies them. What terrifies me?" Varric moved to the window. "The prophecy said she'd have to choose vengeance or mercy. What if she chooses wrong?" "Then I'll stand beside her anyway." "Even if it destroys you?" Varlock was quiet for a long moment. "Especially then." Outside, storm clouds gathered. Lightning forked across the sky, striking the tallest tower repeatedly, drawn to the power still resonating from the Hall of Echoes. The curse was breaking, and no one knew if what came after would be salvation or annihilation. They came for her at midnight, not with blades this time, not with soldiers, with chains forged from the bones of the first vampires, inscribed with symbols older than the kingdom itself. Brina woke to cold metal clamping around her wrists. She tried to scream, but a hand covered her mouth. Selvaра's hand, her beautiful face twisted with something between regret and determination. "I'm sorry, child," the lady whispered. "But you've left us no choice." Brina's power surged instinctively, reaching for the magic that had frozen soldiers in the Hall of Echoes. But the bone chains drank it, absorbing her strength like parched earth drinks rain. She couldn't even make the brand on her wrist glow. "The chains of origin," Selvaara explained, seeing Brina's confusion, "forged when the first vampires walked the earth. They bind magic at its source." Her smile was sad. "We kept them hidden for centuries, hoped we'd never need them again." "Where are you taking me?" "To the truth you should have been told from the beginning." 4 figures emerged from the shadows. Older vampires Brina had seen at court but never spoken to. They moved with the unsettling grace of creatures who'd survived millennia. "The king?" one asked. "Varric is distracting him," Selvaara said. "We have maybe an hour before he realizes she's gone." They carried Brina through passages she'd never seen, deep into the castle's foundations where the stone grew black and slick with moisture. The air turned cold, thick with the smell of old earth and older magic. Finally they reached a chamber sealed with a door of pure silver. Selvaara pressed her palm to it, and Brina felt magic surge, ancient wards recognizing ancient blood. The door opened with a groan that sounded almost like a scream. Inside was a throne room, but not Varlock's throne room. This one was older, the architecture different, more organic, like it had been grown rather than built. Vines of silver metal twisted up the columns. The throne itself was carved from a single piece of midnight black crystal, and on its back was the symbol Brina now recognized. The crown merged with a crescent moon. Lyanna's throne. "What is this place?" Brina whispered. "The original seat of power," Selvaara said, releasing Brina but keeping the chains in place. "Before we murdered Queen Lyanna, this is where she ruled. Afterward, we sealed it away. Tried to forget it existed." Lord Valerian Harmon emerged from the shadows. He looked older than when Brina had last seen him, thinner with dark circles under his amber eyes. Prison had not been kind. "You're supposed to be in the cells," Brina said. "Lady Selvaara has flexible loyalties." Valerian moved closer, studying Brina like a scholar examining an artifact. "We needed to bring you here, to show you what they won't tell you." Who won't? Varlock, Varric, everyone who wants you to believe you're some kind of saviour. Valerian's expression hardened. You need to see what Queen Lyanna really was, what you're becoming. He gestured to the walls. Brina's breath caught. They were covered in murals, painted with such skill they seemed almost alive. But the images they depicted were horrifying. Cities burning, humans fleeing in terror, vampires dying, their bodies dissolving in sunlight. And at the centre of it all, a woman with flowing dark hair and eyes of molten silver. Lyanna, but not the gentle queen from Varric's books. This Lyanna held lightning in her hands. This Lyanna stood over corpses of humans and vampires alike. This Lyanna was destroying everything. No, Brina breathed. Varric said she was breaking the curse, saving people. She was breaking the curse, Valerian confirmed. But do you understand what that means? What happens when you strip vampires of the very thing that makes them vampire? They become human again. They're free. They die. Selvaра's voice was hollow. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, as their immortal bodies try to adapt to mortality. It's agony, Brina. Imagine living for centuries, then suddenly feeling your body decay, feeling hunger, thirst, pain you'd forgotten existed. Lyanna didn't care, Valerian added. She believed the curse was evil, that freeing us was worth any cost, even if that cost was our very existence. He pointed to another mural, Lyanna standing before the vampire court, her power blazing like a sun while vampires burned around her. She gave them a choice, Valerian said. Embrace humanity and suffer, or cling to the curse and die by her hand. Many chose death. Brina's stomach churned. You're lying. Am I? Selvaara moved to a stone pedestal where a book rested. Ancient leather, pages yellowed with age. This is Lyanna's personal journal, the one Varric never showed you. She opened it, and Brina saw elegant handwriting. They call me merciful, but mercy and cruelty are the same when you're forcing change on those who don't want it. I am remaking this world, whether they consent or not. The curse must end, even if I must end every vampire who resists. Brina's hands shook. She wouldn't. She did, Valerian's voice softened. And that's why we killed her. Not from fear of change, but fear of genocide. She would have destroyed us all in her quest to save us. The bone chains grew heavier on Brina's wrists, as if responding to her emotional turmoil. The power you're developing, Selvaara said gently, is the same power Lyanna wielded. You've already frozen soldiers, made the sun bow, caused flowers to bloom in dead stone. She paused. How long before you decide that vampires who don't want to change deserve to burn? I would never. Lyanna said the same thing. Valerian produced another journal entry, his hand trembling slightly. Read this, from 3 days before we poisoned her. Brina read. Valerian came to me today, begging me to stop. He wept. Centuries old, and he wept like a child. You're killing us, he said. I told him the truth. You were already dead. I'm just making it permanent. He called me a monster. Perhaps he's right. Perhaps that's what it takes to break a curse, becoming the very thing you're fighting against. Tears blurred Brina's vision. This can't be real. It's real, Selvaara said, and it's why we're so terrified of you, because you're her heir. Her power flows through your veins, and power like that doesn't ask permission. It takes. The chamber doors burst open. Varlock stood in the entrance, silver eyes blazing with fury. Varric was behind him, looking uncharacteristically dishevelled. Step away from her, Varlock commanded, his voice deadly quiet. We're showing her the truth, Valerian said calmly. Something you've been too cowardly to do. The truth? Varlock moved into the chamber and the temperature dropped. Or your version of it. Read the journals, Silvara challenged. Tell her we're lying. Varlock's gaze fell on the open book, and something flickered across his face. Pain. Recognition. It's true, isn't it? Brina whispered. Lyanna became a monster. She became desperate, Varlock said. There's a difference. Is there? Valerian demanded. Tell the girl what Lyanna did in her final months. Tell her about the village of Thornhaven. Varlock's jaw clenched. That's enough. Thornhaven refused to accept vampires losing the curse, Valerian continued, ignoring him. They believed it would make them vulnerable to human armies. So Lyanna, he turned to Brina, she burned the entire village. 300 vampires. Gone in an afternoon. She gave them a choice, Varlock said through gritted teeth. Change or die isn't a choice, it's tyranny. Silence filled the chamber, heavy as stone. Brina looked at Varlock, at the pain in his ancient eyes. Did you know, when you saved me in the forest, did you know what I might become? Yes. The simple honesty of it broke something in her chest. And you still brought me here? Because I still believe that you're not Lyanna, that you can make different choices. Based on what? Brina's voice cracked. I've been here less than 2 weeks, and I've already frozen soldiers, terrified the court, started breaking the curse. How long before I convince myself that burning people is for their own good? You won't. You don't know that. I know you. Varlock moved closer, careful of the bone chains. I know you apologized to me when I found you dying. I know you cried when learning about Lyanna's murder. I know you asked me to stop when you thought you were hurting people in the Hall of Echoes. Lyanna probably started the same way, Brina whispered. Good intentions, then power, then a choice, Varric said from the doorway. The prophecy said you'd have to choose vengeance or mercy, destruction or healing. Lyanna chose vengeance against a world that cursed her people. What will you choose? Brina looked at the murals on the walls, at the journals documenting Lyanna's descent from queen to executioner, at the bone chains binding her wrists, at Varlock, standing before her with an expression that said he'd follow her into whatever darkness she chose. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what I'll become. Then we'll figure it out together, Varlock said. He reached for the chains. Don't. Silvara stepped forward. If you free her now, if you let this power continue growing unchecked, then I'll take responsibility for it. Even if she destroys you. Varlock's hands closed around the bone chains. They burned him. Brina could see his skin blistering, but he didn't stop. Especially then. The chains shattered. Power exploded through Brina like a dam breaking. The brand on her wrist blazed silver, and the entire chamber shook. For one terrifying moment she felt Lyanna's presence, ancient, furious, hungry for vengeance. Burn them, a voice whispered in her mind. They murdered me. They deserved to burn. Brina looked at Valerian, at Silvara, at the vampires who'd poisoned a queen and buried the truth. Her hands began to glow. Brina, Varlock said softly, look at me. She did. You are not Lyanna. You are not bound by her choices, her pain, her rage. You are Brina Nightfall, and you decide who you become. The glow in her hands intensified. Valerian backed away, genuine fear in his eyes. Brina could kill them, all of them. It would be so easy. Justice, the voice whispered. Make them pay. No, Brina said aloud. The glow faded. I am not Lyanna, she said, her voice steadier now. And I will not become her. She turned to Varlock. Take me out of here. As they left the sealed throne room, Brina looked back once at the murals, at the warning they represented, at the future she'd just chosen to reject. Behind them, Selvaara sank to her knees, trembling. "She spared us." "This time," Valerian said quietly, "but the power is still growing, and we may not be so fortunate again." The vampire court gathered at dawn, not by choice, by royal command. Varlock had summoned every noble, every elder, every soldier who could stand. They filled the grand throne room, the real one, not Lyanna's sealed chamber, their faces pale with exhaustion and uncertainty. No one had slept since Brina spared Valerian and Selvaara. Word had spread through the castle like wildfire. The Night Queen's heir had held the power to execute her enemies, and chose mercy instead. Some saw it as weakness, others as something far more dangerous, proof that she might be better than them all. Brina stood in an antechamber staring at her reflection in a full-length mirror. Varric had brought her a gown, deep midnight blue that seemed to shift between solid fabric and flowing starlight. It fit perfectly, though she'd never been measured for it. "Lyanna's," Varric said softly, seeing her expression. "We preserved her wardrobe, couldn't bring ourselves to destroy it, even after you helped kill her." Varric flinched, but didn't deny it. "I was young, foolish. I believed the elders when they said she'd gone mad." He met Brina's eyes in the mirror. "I've spent 300 years regretting that belief." "Is that why you're helping me? Guilt?" "Partly," he adjusted the gown's shoulders, "but also because I see the difference between you and her. Lyanna would have burned that chamber last night. You walked away." "I wanted to burn it," Brina admitted. "I felt her in my head, telling me to make them pay. But you didn't listen. That's what matters." A knock at the door. Varlock entered, and Brina's breath caught. He wore formal regalia, black and crimson with silver embroidery that caught the light like captured moonbeams. His crown sat heavy on his dark hair, but it was his expression that struck her, vulnerable, uncertain, almost afraid. "The court is assembled," he said quietly. "Are you ready?" "No." Brina turned from the mirror. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be ready for." "Neither do I, honestly." A ghost of a smile touched Varlock's lips. "I've been king for 400 years, and I've never done anything like this." "Like what?" Instead of answering, he extended his hand. "Trust me?" Brina hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His skin was cold, but his grip was steady. Together they walked into the throne room. Silence fell like a blade. Every vampire in the chamber stood as Varlock entered with Brina at his side. Their eyes tracked her movement, cataloguing every detail. The gown that had belonged to a dead queen, the silver light flickering in her amber eyes, the way the very air seemed to bend around her. Ferron Bloodfang stood near the throne, his face carved from stone. Beside him, the soldiers Brina had frozen in the Hall of Echoes watched with barely concealed fear. Selvaara and Valerian occupied their usual positions, though both looked diminished somehow, smaller, older, defeated. Varlock led Brina to the centre of the room and released her hand. Then he did something that made the entire court gasp. He stepped aside, not behind her, not beside her, aside, giving her the position of prominence while he took a secondary stance. "You all demanded to know what this human girl is," Varlock began, his voice carrying to every corner. "You've schemed, plotted, and killed to eliminate what you don't understand. So I'm going to tell you exactly what Brina Nightfall represents." He turned to face her fully. "She is the heir of Queen Lyanna Nightborn. Her blood carries the same power that built this castle, sustained our kingdom, and yes, began breaking our curse." He paused. But she is also something Lyanna never was. "What's that?" someone called from the upper tiers. "Merciful!" Varloc's gaze swept the assembled court. Last night, Brina was shown the truth about Lyanna's final months. The villages burned, the vampires executed, the descent into tyranny disguised as salvation. His voice hardened. She was given every reason to believe that power corrupts absolutely, that she would inevitably become what Lyanna became. He turned back to Brina, and something in his ancient eyes softened. And then she was freed from the only chains that could bind her magic. She stood before the very vampires who'd kidnapped her, shown her horrors, tried to convince her she was a monster. He paused, and she walked away. No vengeance, no violence, just choice. "A temporary choice," Valerian said quietly. "Power like hers will eventually..." "Will eventually what?" Varlock interrupted. "Corrupt her? Turn her into Lyanna?" He laughed, but there was no humour in it. "You're so convinced that history must repeat itself that you can't see what's right in front of you." He moved to his throne. 400 years he'd sat upon it, made decisions from it, ruled from it. And then Varlock Ashcroft did something no vampire king had done in recorded history. He removed his crown. The court erupted in chaos. "My lord, no! This is madness! You cannot... Silence!" Varlock's voice cracked like thunder, and power radiated from him in waves. The court fell quiet instantly. "I have ruled this kingdom for 4 centuries, Varlock said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was doing. "I've made decisions that saved us, decisions that damned us. I've held power so long I forgot what it felt like, to question whether I deserved it." He looked at the crown in his hands, twisted metal and embedded gems that had sat on the brows of a dozen kings before him. Queen Lyanna didn't fail because she was powerful. She failed because she ruled alone, because she believed her vision was the only one that mattered, because she forgot that true strength isn't forcing others to follow, it's inspiring them to choose. He descended from the throne, carrying the crown. The court watched in stunned silence as their king crossed the distance to where Brina stood, trembling. "I am not abdicating," Varlock said clearly. "I am not surrendering my kingdom. I am doing something that should have been done 300 years ago." He knelt before Brina. The gasps were audible this time. Some vampires looked away, unable to witness their king kneeling before a human. Others leaned forward, transfixed. "What are you doing?" Brina whispered, her eyes wide. "Correcting a mistake." Varlock held up the crown, but not to place it on her head. Instead, he set it on the floor between them. "The prophecy said the throne would kneel before you, not beside, before. I always thought it meant submission, conquest." "What does it mean?" Brina asked. "Recognition." Varlock's voice was barely audible. "The throne doesn't kneel in defeat. It kneels in acknowledgement that you were always meant to stand here, that your power isn't an invasion, it's a return." "I don't want to rule," Brina said desperately. "I don't want power over anyone." "I know. That's exactly why you should have it." Varlock looked up at her, and his silver eyes held something Brina had never seen before. Hope. Not alone. Not like Lyanna tried to do, but beside me, as my equal, my... He paused, seeming to struggle with the word. "My queen." The silence that followed was absolute. Ferron stepped forward, his voice shaking. "My lord, you cannot crown a human as vampire queen. The law forbids." "I am the law," Varlock said simply, "and I'm changing it." He stood, lifting the crown from the floor, but he didn't place it on Brina's head. Instead, he held it between them. "This crown is a choice," he said softly, for her ears alone. "Not a command. Not a destiny, a choice. You can refuse it. Walk away. Live whatever life you want, and I'll make sure no one ever harms you again." "Or," Brina whispered, "or you can help me build something new. Not a kingdom ruled by fear and curses. Not Lyanna's vision of forced salvation. Something better." His hand trembled slightly. "But only if you choose it freely." Brina looked at the crown, heavy, ancient, representing everything she'd never wanted. Then at the court, hundreds of vampires who feared her, hated her, or saw her as a threat. Then at Varlock, who'd saved her life, protected her, and was now offering her power she'd never asked for. What would Lyanna do? She wondered. The answer came immediately. Take the crown. Force them to kneel. Rule with absolute power because she believed she knew best. What do I want to do? That was harder to answer. Slowly Brina reached for the crown. Varlock's breath caught, but instead of placing it on her own head, Brina did something unexpected. She took Varlock's crown, the one he'd removed, and held it beside the one he offered her. "If I do this," she said clearly, loudly enough for the entire court to hear, "I'm not ruling alone, and neither are you. We do this together, as equals, or not at all." Varlock's expression transformed, surprise melting into something that looked dangerously close to reverence. "Together," he agreed. They placed the crowns on each other simultaneously. The moment the metal touched Brina's head, the castle sang. Light exploded from the night-throne crystal, not purple or silver, but a cascade of colours that painted the walls in impossible hues. The curse, ancient and terrible, cracked audibly. Not breaking completely, but changing, transforming into something that had never existed before. Vampires gasped as warmth touched their skin for the first time in centuries, as they felt their hearts beat with rhythms they'd forgotten, as the darkness that had sustained them their entire existence began to shift into something that was both shadow and light. "What's happening?" someone cried. Varric stood, awe written across his face. "She's not breaking the curse, she's rewriting it." The castle walls bloomed with silver flowers, the stone corridors filled with warm light that didn't burn, and every vampire in the throne room felt it, the curse loosening its grip without destroying them, change without annihilation, freedom without death. Lyanna's dream, but done right. Brina swayed, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Varlock's arm went around her waist instantly, steadying her. "I've got you," he murmured. "Did we just... yes?" His smile was genuine this time, transforming his entire face. "We just changed everything." The court remained silent, processing the impossible. Then, slowly, one vampire knelt, then another, not from fear, not from compulsion, from choice. Even Ferron, after a long moment of internal struggle, lowered himself to one knee. His eyes held uncertainty, but also something that might have been hope. "Your Majesties," Varric said formally, though his voice shook with emotion, "the kingdom awaits your command." Brina looked at Varlock, panic flickering across her face. "What do I say?" He squeezed her hand gently. "Trust yourself." She took a breath, then addressed the kneeling court. "Rise, all of you. Because if we're building something new, we're not doing it with anyone on their knees." The vampires stood slowly, uncertainty and wonder mixing on their ancient faces. "Change is coming," Brina continued, her voice growing stronger. "Not through force, not through fear, but through choice. And anyone who wants no part of it is free to leave. This kingdom will no longer be a prison." "And for those who stay?" Selvaira asked quietly. Brina looked at her, at the vampire who'd kidnapped her, shown her horrors, tried to convince her she was doomed. For those who stay, Brina said, we build the future together. The night throne crystal pulsed with steady, warm light. Outside, the sun rose over a castle that no longer feared it, and 2 crowns, one ancient, one newly claimed, caught the light and blazed like stars. 5 years later, the kingdom had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Brina stood on the castle balcony, watching the sun set over lands that had once been called the Dead Territories. Now they bloomed. Silver flowers grew alongside ordinary roses. Trees that had been bare for centuries bore fruit. Rivers that had run black with old magic now sparkled clear. The curse hadn't broken completely. Vampires were still vampires. But they could walk in sunlight for hours without burning, could taste food again, feel warmth, experience sensations they'd thought lost forever. Some had chosen to leave, unable to adapt to a world where they were no longer apex predators. Ferron had been among them, departing with a respectful bow and words Brina still remembered. "You proved me wrong, Your Majesty. I hope that brings you some satisfaction." It hadn't, but it had brought peace. Others had stayed and slowly, carefully built something new. Humans and vampires trading in border towns, tentative alliances forming, the world learning that monsters could change when given the choice instead of the command. "You're thinking too hard again," Varlock said, emerging onto the balcony. He wore simple clothing now, no crown, no formal regalia. They only wore the crowns for ceremonies. The rest of the time they were just themselves. "I'm thinking about tomorrow," Brina admitted. Tomorrow a delegation was arriving from Blackthorn Marsh, her village, the people who'd bound her hands in iron thread and thrown her into the forest to die. "You don't have to see them," Varlock said quietly, moving to stand beside her. "Varric can send them away." "No?" Brina's hand touched the faint scar on her wrist. The brand had healed years ago, leaving only a silver mark that glowed when she used her power. "I need to do this." "For them or for you?" "For closure." Varlock's hand found hers, his touch still cool but no longer cold. The curse's weakening had given vampires back some of their warmth, though they'd never be truly human again. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I'll stand beside you." "I know." Brina leaned against him, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. "That's the only reason I can face them." The delegation arrived at noon when the sun was highest, a deliberate choice on Brina's part. Let them see that vampires walked freely in daylight now. Let them see what their cursed girl had accomplished. There were 12 of them, village elders, including Garrick and Moira. They looked older, smaller somehow. Fear had carved lines into their faces. That hadn't been there 5 years ago. They were led into the throne room, where Brina and Varlock sat side by side on thrones of equal height. Varric stood to the side, his expression carefully neutral. A honor guard of vampires lined the walls, not threatening, but present. The villagers stopped at the required distance, staring at Brina with expressions mixing awe and terror. She'd changed too, no longer the frightened 17-year-old girl they'd cast out. She wore a gown of midnight blue, the crown resting easily on her head, silver light flickering in her eyes. Power radiated from her like heat from a flame. "Your Majesty," Garrick said, his voice cracking. He dropped to his knees. The others followed immediately. "We come seeking audience." "Rise," Brina said, her voice steady. "I told you 5 years ago, no one kneels in this kingdom unless they choose to." They stood awkwardly, uncertain. "Why are you here?" Brina asked. Moira stepped forward, her hands trembling. "To beg forgiveness for what we did. To—" her voice broke. "To ask for your mercy." Our village is dying, Garrick added desperately. The crops won't grow. The wells run dry. The marsh itself seems to be rejecting us. We've tried everything, but nothing works. And you think I'm the cause? Brina asked. We know you are. Moira's eyes filled with tears. The land has been dying since the night we cast you out. We thought it was coincidence at first, but, Your Majesty, please, we were wrong. We were so terribly wrong. You were afraid, Brina said quietly. That's no excuse. I didn't say it was an excuse. I said it was the truth. Brina stood, descending from her throne. Varlock tensed slightly, but didn't stop her. You saw a child who was different, who made shadows move and flowers bloom out of season. And instead of asking questions, instead of trying to understand, you branded her and threw her away. Garrick flinched. We thought we were protecting the village. From what? A 17-year-old girl who'd never hurt anyone? Brina's voice remained calm, but power rippled through the words. I cried when the other children wouldn't play with me. I apologized for existing. I made myself as small as possible, hoping you'd stop being afraid. We know, Moira whispered. We see that now. Please, Your Majesty. Do you know what happened the night you threw me into the deadwood? Brina interrupted. I thought I would die. I wanted to die because I'd spent my entire life being told I was cursed, that I brought misfortune, that the world would be better without me. Tears streamed down Moira's face. We're sorry. And then Varlock found me. Brina glanced back at him, still seated on his throne, watching her with ancient, patient eyes. He saw the mark on my wrist, the brand you'd given me, and he said something I'd never heard before. He said I'd done nothing wrong. She turned back to the villagers. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw something other than a curse. He saw me. Brina's hands clenched at her sides. Do you understand what that meant? What it still means? Yes, Garrick said brokenly, and we will spend the rest of our lives regretting that we couldn't see it too. Silence filled the throne room. Brina studied the people who'd raised her to hate herself, saw the genuine remorse in their eyes, the desperation, the fear. 5 years ago she might have forgiven them immediately. Lyanna might have burned them where they stood. But Brina was neither the girl who'd been cast out, nor the queen who'd descended into tyranny. She was something else entirely. The land is dying because it's connected to me, Brina said finally. When you cast me out, you severed that connection. The marsh, the crops, the wells, they've been waiting for me to return. Hope flickered across the villagers' faces. But I'm not returning. The hope died instantly. Your Majesty, please, Moira began. I'm not returning, Brina repeated, her voice firm, because Blackthorn Marsh was never my home. It was a prison where I spent 17 years apologising for breathing. This, she gestured to the castle, the kingdom, this is my home now. Then we're doomed, Garrick said hollowly. I didn't say that. Brina descended the steps fully, stopping a few feet from the delegation. I can restore the land's connection, heal what was broken. Your village will thrive again. Thank you, Moira gasped. Oh, gods, thank you. But you will never contact me again. The words fell like stones. I will heal your land because innocent people live there. Children who had nothing to do with what you did to me. Families who deserve to survive. Brina's eyes hardened. But you, the elders who bound my hands and branded my wrist and threw me into darkness, you will live with what you did. You will watch your village bloom and know that you're only alive because I chose mercy. You never showed me. She raised her hand and silver light blazed from her palm. The villagers gasped, stumbling back, but the power wasn't aimed at them. It shot through the throne room windows, arcing across miles of distance, touching the blackthorn marsh with magic that pulsed like a heartbeat. Brina could feel it, the land responding, drinking in her power, coming back to life. Wells filling, crops pushing through barren soil, the marsh itself exhaling like a creature waking from a long sleep. When she lowered her hand, she swayed slightly. Varlock was there instantly, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. "It's done," Brina said. "Your village will survive, prosper even. The land will be more fertile than it's been in generations." "Your Majesty," Garrick tried again, "leave." Brina's voice wasn't cruel, but it was final. "Your lives were spared by mercy you never gave. Don't mistake that mercy for forgiveness. Don't mistake my healing your land for wanting you in my life." She turned away from them, from the people who'd raised her to hate herself, and walked back to her throne. Back to Varlock, who took her hand as she sat. Back to the kingdom she'd built from ashes and second chances. "Please," Moira called out, desperate, "let us at least—" "Varric," Brina said quietly. "Show them out." Varric moved forward smoothly. "This way, if you please." The villagers had no choice but to follow, casting backward glances at the girl they'd thrown away, who now sat beside a vampire king wearing a crown of starlight. As they reached the doors, Garrick stopped, looking back one final time. "We called you cursed," he said, his voice breaking, "but you were the blessing we never deserved." Brina said nothing. The doors closed. Silence filled the throne room. "Are you all right?" Varlock asked softly. Brina was quiet for a long moment, staring at the doors through which her past had just walked. "I thought I'd feel satisfaction," she admitted, "seeing them beg, watching them realize what they'd lost. And you don't?" "I feel empty, like I've been carrying anger for so long that now that it's gone, I don't know what to fill the space with." Varlock's hand squeezed hers. "We'll figure it out together." "Together," Brina echoed. She looked at him, at the vampire who'd found her dying in a forest and chose to save her, who'd knelt before her when his court demanded her death, who'd stood beside her through every impossible choice, every terrifying transformation. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "That night in the forest? Bringing me here instead of leaving me to die?" Varlock was quiet, considering the question seriously. "Not once," he said finally. "You shattered my world, Brina Nightfall, broke every certainty I'd clung to for 400 years, forced me to question everything I thought I knew about power and purpose, and what it means to rule." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to the silver scar on her wrist. "And I would do it again in a heartbeat." Outside, the sun blazed over a kingdom where vampires walked in daylight. Inside, two monarchs sat side by side, one born to darkness, one thrown into it, building a future neither could have imagined. The villagers who'd called Brina cursed returned to Blackthorn Marsh to find their lands blooming with impossible beauty. They never contacted her again, and Brina never looked back. She'd been thrown into darkness to die. Instead, she became the light that rewrote the world, and they begged, but only after they'd lost her forever. Years later, travellers would speak of the vampire kingdom. They called it a cautionary tale, but Brina Nightfall called it justice, the best kind, living well while those who'd wronged her lived with regret. The end years later, travellers would speak of the vampire kingdom where flowers bloomed in stone and sunlight was no longer feared. They'd whisper about the human, queen who'd transformed monsters into something new, who'd been given every reason to choose vengeance and chose mercy instead. And in Blackthorn Marsh, children grew up hearing stories about the girl their elders had thrown away, the cursed one who became a queen. They called it a cautionary tale, but Brina Nightfall called it justice, the best kind, living well while those who'd wronged her lived with regret. Cursed girl to vampire queen. If you felt that, like and follow, because legends recognize legends.